So this is Shah from Velocity. He's also a Tron alum and had a startup as well. So he's kind of a bit of an interesting journey to get here. He's going to be talking about some life lessons from basically what he's gone through. So I'm going to pass him the microphone and welcome Jay.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Excellent, thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. This building wasn't here when I graduated. The other one had just come online, the E5. Lots has changed since then, but what hasn't changed is my passion for the output of the University of Waterloo, specifically in engineering. The farther along I've been since graduation, the more I feel really, really strongly that we have something extremely unique with the capstone projects. The ability to work on something in groups, with peers that you've been building relationships with, the IP policy that allows you to just take that and build a startup, the co-op experience that allows you to actually solve problems of relevance because you have lots of commercial experience, unlike other graduates from other engineering programs. So I'm super, super passionate about this, and what I'd like to inject on top of this is the lessons learned along the way through both my own startup and the hundreds of other startups I've observed as a Y Combinator alumni, as someone who's gone through Velocity, someone who now runs Velocity as its director. So I've seen a lot of stuff. And for those of you that track startup stats, or at least pay any attention to that, not every startup survives, and so there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the ones that don't, so that you can be that much more efficient should you take that path either now or sometime in the future. Do we end up finding that clicker? No? Okay, all right, I will dance. Okay, I think I already talked about this, so I'm going to skip it. I'm going to jump right in. It's right here. I'm blind. Thank you. All right, yeah, so I'm going to jump right in because I'd love to leave some time for questions. I think that's really important just to be able to get at specific things you might be thinking about going into your capstone project. So there's probably 4 or 5 topics I'll cover, and I'll try and go a little bit deep. The first is getting real customer validation. I think we've heard that from a couple speakers today, so I can't stress this enough, that as technically competent individuals, you probably will default to marvel in the technological solution that you've created and less focus on the actual customer problem that is being solved. It's incredibly important to get this right, otherwise you're wasting your time and energy, and of course no one wants to do that. What I mean by customer validation, we've heard lots of things before, but I'm going to go through pitfalls. One of them is being aware of what we call idle interest. So you are all in very exciting stages of your career right now. You're about to graduate. There's lots of people that are cheering for you. There's lots of pitch competitions that want to give you support, including the Velocity pitch competition. And a lot of those signals may look like they're reinforcing the idea you're working on, but you haven't actually tested customer interest. And so you have to be very clear about what is idle interest and supportive interest of the activity you are doing versus interest in the product you're building or the problem you are solving. I'll give you one very specific example from a company that's gone through Velocity and Y Combinator recently. They were building a device that was going to solve or was going to increase the quality of life for an individual with a particular medical condition. On the surface, that seemed like a great idea. I was like, oh, you have a medical condition, there's this many of them, they could do the market sizing, they could figure out how much the current device cost, they could say they were increasing the quality of life for this price differential. When they talked to people, including patients were incredibly excited. They're like, yes, this sounds great, we would totally buy this. So they went off and they started building it. They went to the lab, they started creating prototypes, it was nanotech things, they went and started doing nanoengineering, and they built a prototype. They took it to their potential patients, and the patients were like, yeah, this is really cool. And they were like, great, well, will you buy it? And the patient said, no, we don't pay for any of this stuff. Our insurance company pays for all of it. Oh, well, I guess we have to go talk to the insurance company. Go talk to the insurance company. Well, yeah, we can buy this maybe, but how much does it cost relative to what we're paying now? And where's the kickback scheme? Because that's what existed in the current medical device market. And within about 60 days, they went from all this interest from the patient perspective to the idea of being completely dead because no one would pay for it. And it's because of idle interest. So that is something you have to be very, very careful of. I will elaborate a little bit more on how to evolve this problem or avoid this problem on another slide. But treat interest with skepticism, right? A challenge question you can look at for interest is, would you actually pay for this thing? It's really interesting. Like people can be excited. People can be very excited about something, but will somebody actually pay for it? And survey design is a whole other topic we could probably talk about for half an hour. You don't ask that question at the front. You ask that question much later after you've asked a bunch of other value-defining questions. So I wrote this here as unhelpful engineering perspective because, again, as engineers, I think we tend to want to build things. That tends to be where our alignment is. But building something often means actually making it functional. But to validate your customer, you don't have to be functional. So again, using this case example from the first one, this medical device could have just been a black box that had an input and an output that was completely fake. And they could have gone to an insurance company before they had built anything in the lab and said, would you buy this black box that has the output you want and the input that you can provide? And they would have said no. They wouldn't have had to waste a whole bunch of months and time building something. And so I strongly encourage you to think about the absolute stripped down, completely smoke and mirrors version of the thing you can build to achieve customer validation. That doesn't help you with your capstone project, of course, because you need to show technical capacity and competence. But if you're pursuing a startup or you're pursuing actually approaching customers, you don't have to build the thing that actually works. I made that mistake firsthand in our capstone project. We actually built this big buffer box thing. If you're not familiar with what it was, it's kind of like a digital locker. And we thought we had to build the whole thing. We were in the student machine shop every day until it closed, because we thought you had to build the whole thing, and it had to work, and the screen had to work, and you had to swipe your driver's license, and all of it had to work, otherwise we wouldn't be able to prove that it was real. We didn't have to do any of that. We could have just completely mocked it up and done some trials in like a third or a quarter of the time. I say all this, but there's one really big exception. Some of the world's most disruptive ideas cannot be measured by asking for customer input. If you had asked the average person if they wanted a search engine in 1990, they would have been like, no, I don't need that. And we've had some other examples, like the automobile examples as well. And these are often called toy markets. I've hyperlinked that because this slide set will be available online. There's a great article by YC on toy markets. What they mean by that is right now, the market you're approaching looks like a hobby. Looks like no one's ever going to actually get into this. But as markets change over time and as technology catches up, this tiny little toy thing, this thing that Larry Page and Sergey were working on in their basement called the search engine, actually became a hundreds of billions of dollar idea. And so if you're truly going to try and build an empire, often the most disruptive ideas you cannot validate through customer validation. You're going to have to take a leap of faith based on some informed research and on your projection of what the future is going to be. And that's an inherently more risky approach, but it could also be incredibly rewarding if you get it right. So that's kind of the all chips on the table, roll the dice, walk away approach versus the leveled, do all your research and see what happens. So just be aware that that is a possibility as well. If everybody did lean startup, you'd never have these massively disruptive ideas. So there's a balance. Okay, I wanted to foil each of these sections that I'm going to talk about just with some personal experience without going too much into the Bufferbox story. But these are examples of being incredibly scrappy around customer validation. So to back up for a second, Bufferbox was just trying to deliver packages asynchronously. So if you weren't at home, you missed your delivery, you wouldn't have to go to the post office. You could go to some secondary location that was more convenient to you, like a grocery store, 7-Eleven, here in SLC on campus. But to go from that idea to actually having a production unit was going to take months, right? Our capstone project was like a rusty ball of it's going to hurt you if you interact with it. And so to actually get a production device would have taken a long time. So we actually started delivering packages ourselves, like me and 2 other co-founders put on a green t-shirt. We'd email a student saying, hey, where do you want to meet us on campus? We'll charge you $3 to bring the package to you. That was our way to validate that people were actually going to pay for this service. And surprisingly enough, people trusted us with that. We got like laptops delivered to us at a random address, and we'd scooter around campus at DC, be like, look for the guy in the green hoodie. It was bizarre, but people paid for it. That means the problem was real. And then we did things like we would wait in line or stand in line when at the beginning of term during the mad bookstore rush. I don't know if y'all still use books anymore, but there was like massive lines at the bookstore, and so we'd go through the line and we'd just hand a flyer to everyone saying, hey, you don't need to be in this line, just buy your books online and we'll ship it to you through our service. And like half the people left the line. So again, that was validation that they really wanted to use this. All of that was incredibly awkward for us. Like we were not, I don't think any of our founding team were inherently extroverts that wanted to go out and talk to people that we had never met or have conversations that clearly people didn't want to have with us because we kind of felt like we were being salespeople. We had to do that to verify that what we were building was something people wanted. The last picture I put there just is like kind of a stock photo of a pitch competition. I can't stress this enough that pitch competitions often evaluate your potential now relative to the other peers in the pitch competition. They do not evaluate whether you can be a billion-dollar company. That's what VCs do for a living, and they get it wrong all the time. So do not conflate that with the fact that you have a really good idea. You should totally do that. You should go get the money and spend it on building a great product, but don't conflate those two things. Okay, the next point I wanted to cover is follow the money. This is a really big one because it can solve a lot of problems if you follow the money deep enough. What I mean by that is, do you know what impact you are having in whatever problem space you are solving that generates a financial output. Right? If you can follow the money long enough to see that, you'll be able to articulate your value proposition much clearer than you could if you didn't completely follow the transactions all the way to source. I'll give you an example because that was probably pretty abstract. The other point that correlates to this is adoption of your product, should you take it to market, is going to be correlated to its financial return. If you're going to help people make a lot more money or help a business make a lot more money, they're much more likely to adopt it earlier. And so you're trying to get this market to adopt your product. The stronger the incentive, the financial incentive to adopt your product, the more likely they are to do so. And so again, you can define that, and you can measure that financial impact if you follow the money. And the last point that I wanted to make is that value creation is kind of independent from value extraction. You can cause something great in the market. You can improve somebody's quality of life. You can change healthcare costs. You can help a business save a lot of money. But if you can't get paid for it, you can't build a business that's sustainable. You can't actually build a product that will scale and affect millions or billions of people. And often that can be a really hard thing to figure out. And specifically in the healthcare system as an example, it's really hard to figure out how to get paid. You might be helping somebody, but it's really hard to figure out how to get the money out. You need reimbursement codes and you need to integrate with insurance companies. It can get really complicated. And that's true in other sectors as well. Sometimes it's really hard to figure out, how am I going to convince the person that bought this that they should pay me for it? Right? Every time I hear a pitch that says, we're going to save someone a lot of money, my ears go up. I'm like, yeah, okay, that may be true, but it's going to be really hard a year from now for you to say, I saved you $1 million, give me 500,000. They're going to be like, what? No, we saved it, we pocketed it, it's ours, right? So you have to be really careful about the difference between value creation and value extraction. So I'll give you an example just firsthand with BufferBox. This was us in DC on our capstone symposium day. So that was our rusty metal box. The paint was still wet because we'd spray painted it on the way to rolling it into DC. We painted this red because we thought our customer was Canada Post. We thought we were going to build this great box to asynchronously deliver packages. And of course, our customer is Canada Post. They have these community mailboxes in all the new neighborhoods. Instead of putting community mailboxes, they're just going to put a BufferBox. That's why we had a solar panel on the back of the thing. I don't think it was hooked up, but our capstone advisor didn't know that. So that was our worldview on capstone day. Okay, and so then we graduate, and we won some pitch competitions, got some validation that we thought was validation. And we spent months after that trying to figure out what our actual business was. Because in this worldview, we had one customer. We had one shot to make a sale. That doesn't really make for a sustainable business. And the more we dived into it, and this down here was the results of like us hardcore for 2 years trying to figure out what our business was and following the money. It wasn't just Canada Post, right? It was an entire world of shipping carriers that we needed to think about. It was the FedExes, the UPSs, the USPSs, the state carriers as well. But it wasn't just them, because they're just the logistics provider. It was their customers, the Amazons, the Shopifys, the Walmarts, the tens of thousands of long-tail retailers. They're the people that's actually paying and commissioning these companies to deliver something. Okay? But it wasn't even just them, it was their customers. It was the consumers online that were buying things. And that, what took us a while to figure out, was the most powerful part of our business model. Because what we could articulate later to investors, to potential partners, was, hey, all of these people here for decades have been used to business deliveries. FedEx's primary line of business was delivering things to businesses. Businesses are open consistently, they have reception, and they get multiple packages at a time. So the economics for FedEx to deliver 10 packages for $10 a pop to a place that's always open was amazing. They were minting money. Fast forward to the era of e-commerce and the era of digitizing most business processes. There was a lot less deliveries to businesses. Nobody's shipping around legal documents anymore or paper. Instead, everyone's buying things online, consumers, and they're delivering things to houses that don't have anyone at home, only one package delivered per stop, and they want them really fast. Every consumer online wants free delivery, and they want next day delivery, right? So that fundamental shift is what allowed us to say that BufferBox was going to be the next big thing in e-commerce because you had this massive market change. We had no hope in hell of articulating that during our capstone symposium. It took us a while to figure that out. But if we didn't figure that out, we didn't have a business because we thought we were selling to Canada Post, when really we were trying to work this entire chain, following the money all the way to the source of who's actually causing the market change. And what was causing the market change was people buying things online. So that, whatever your idea is, doing that exercise will be critically important for you to be able to talk about your business or product in a way that makes sense as a business, not just a project. Okay, point number 3 here, global aspiration. I was going to say this differently, But then I found out this was recorded, so I had to change how I was going to say it. The nice way of saying this is that the Canadian market is tiny. It's very, very small. That is an objectively, factually true statement. The editorial comment on that is that the Canadian market is also not incredibly risk tolerant. We have a lot of businesses, large businesses that are oligopolies, is that the word? You look at our telecommunications sector, you look at our banking sector, you look at other major industries in Canada, they're not terribly competitive. And so as an innovator in this country, this isn't the best place to try and get early adopters, because our biggest businesses aren't early adopters. You're more likely to get Google to buy your product than you are to get the bank down on Bay Street. So focusing on Canadian markets is a mistake. So often I hear people pitch me, oh, the Canadian market potential here is $100 million. It's like, I don't care what the Canadian market potential is. You're not going to build your business. You're not going to build an empire. You might build a business, but you're not going to build an empire in Canada. You can start one here. You can build a company here. All the revenue is going to come from outside of Canada, substantially. It's really important to acknowledge this early, because you need to go and talk to people outside the country. Going back to this slide, we were talking to Canada Post. Not only did we have that wrong, we were talking to one carrier in one country that happens to be really small. We needed to be talking to all these people, right? And so, very, very important to remember that Canada is small. Yes, this is a great country. Yes, we have a platform for innovation, but we are not the consuming base, right? The consuming base is outside. Okay, the second point is really me just saying the same thing again. And then the last point is, if you're going to go through all the effort of trying to take your idea and make it a startup, why chase a really small prize? Why go after a really small pie? And Canada is a really small pie at the end of the day from a revenue perspective. So go big, right? Go after really big markets, whatever that might mean to you. Asia, Europe, the US, all of the above. They're all bigger, way bigger than we are. Okay, this one's fun. You're in, I'm going to maybe go backwards because I like my last point most. You're in this really sweet spot area of your career where you can play the student card for a while. Even after you graduate, you can say you're a new grad. And the world tends to open up when you say that, because people, even your direct competitors to the idea you have, will tend to be like, oh, they're just students. It's okay. They're completely non-threatening. We can tell them all our secrets. And so if you're trying to do competitive intelligence, or if you're trying to figure out what's going on in the market, you have this card that you can play that you're a recent grad, you're just doing some research, you're just trying to learn about the market. And it works incredibly well. I will show you an example if you don't believe me. That's your way to get a head start in this market, right? If you're going to pursue your product going forward. You might need to talk to the FedExes of the world like I had to in our example, and you'll be able to get that meeting with the senior exec much more easily if you play that card, because you're completely non-threatening. Working backwards here, the other point is don't be afraid to contact upper management, right? Like if you're doing research, contact the CEO or the VP or whatever their most senior level is, because they're interested in talking about their problems and their businesses. And if you approach them in a non-threatening way with a curiosity-driven approach, they're very likely to take that phone call and want to be what they would perceive as a mentor to you, even though you might just be looking for information from them. I forgot this is recorded. Okay, and then the last is recognize what you don't know, right? Like we didn't fully appreciate, again on that capstone symposium day, that we really didn't understand the logistics market, right? The market that moved millions of packages a day had been around for centuries. Here we were, 4 undergrads in engineering, being like, we're going to change the logistics market. We'd never even set foot in a sortation plant, right? And so we had to recognize what we didn't know, put away our ego, and say we have a lot of learning to do in this industry. We may be able to build something in the machine shop, but we don't actually know this industry. And I put this here as a helpful reference, kind of the known unknown model, trying to figure out what the known knowns are, known unknowns, unknown unknowns, the whole matrix there. It's just a useful way to frame all your knowledge gaps. So I'll give you an example here. 2 or 3 months after we'd graduated and we decided we were going to pursue this startup path, we didn't have a product, we didn't know what we were doing, like morale was low because of the first 2 things. Like we were all excited when we graduated and we were like, crap, we don't know what we're doing at all. And so at a certain point, our kind of team hit a breaking point and said, we've got to change something. And so one of our little sprints of change was to reach out to as many people as we could in the logistics industry and actually get real world information from them. And we went to the top. We went to the general managers of the country, the VPs, the execs, the CEOs, for anyone we could get a hold of, Canada Post, UPS, FedEx, everyone. And we did this over LinkedIn. We just found them. We bought, one of us bought a LinkedIn premium package, which came with a bunch of in-mails. And we just started sending in-mails from that. And one of them was to the general manager of FedEx Canada. And this is the screenshot. I have not edited this other than blurring out their name and contact. And the email is very simple. It basically says, hey, I'm a student. I'm completely non-threatening. I'm doing some research on this project. Being recent grads, we're keen to learn about the pain points of the biggest players. And with your decades of experience, we'd love to talk to you. So a little bit of ego massaging in there. And our hit rate was pretty good. We got a lot of responses. But this response stood out because this person who was the general manager of FedEx Canada, ran the Canadian operations, said, I'm interested in meeting with you. Will you come to Toronto to tour our sortation facility? That was like a huge win. We didn't know this person. They didn't know us. Like, we're a complete stranger. The subsequent emails got even more interesting because they do their sortation at night. They sort 100,000 packages at Pearson Airport. So he said, well, why don't you come by at 8? We'll go for dinner with the whole exec team, and then we'll walk through the sortation plant. So we did that, of course. And when we get into the plant, he was like, well, I mean, we're loading the planes right now. And he was talking to my co-founder. He's like, do you want to drive that thing that moves the plane into the tarmac? And he got to do that. Like these, you'd think this was super corporate, stuffy people, but they were just so interested to be engaged by some young, energetic folks that really cared about what they were doing. And we got to see the entire plant. We got numbers. Our biggest outcome out of that was we needed to know what percentage of FedEx deliveries went to households, went to residences, because that allowed us to build the rest of our business model. And we couldn't get that number anywhere. It wasn't anywhere. And they openly told us what that number was when we went to this plant. So the power of just asking for help to the right person in the right way can be incredibly changing for your product trajectory and for what you're going to do. Okay, I think those were the main points. I could talk forever, I think, about other mistakes I've seen, but those are ones I see so often that I really, really, really want you not to make any of those mistakes and to have to just short circuit all that stuff so you can get to building your startup much faster. Some resources for those that love to just digest this stuff in a more structured way than random talks and things like that. I find that these are some incredible resources to short circuit your understanding of how to bring things to the world. As a Y Combinator alum, that resource page is just pure gold, and it is not that long, right? There's like 15 articles. You can read them all in a week, and you'll be a startup wizard. And then there's kind of 3 other authors. They all have a bunch of books, but I picked out a couple in particular. So Steve Blank, if you just want like the startup playbook, that's probably a pretty good one to start from. If you want to go a little bit more abstract, Jeffrey Moore, Crossing the Chasm, Inside the Tornado, both really good. Crossing the Chasm more on how do you bring a product to scale into market. Inside the Tornado is more about if you're terrified of sales and talking to people, read that one. And Clayton Christensen, Innovator's Dilemma is a good one if you're trying to compete with megacorps. If you're trying to compete with Google, that's a good one to read because Google will not be able to do everything successfully. And then Competing Against Luck is a really good one if you're trying to figure out how to find amazing problems to solve. If you don't yet have the problem and you're trying to figure out what it is to solve, do that. I will put the link there. So I forgot to hyperlink that, but there's a really short form Harvard Business Review article. So if you don't have the time to read the whole book, you can read the article. I just wanted to end on this, that doing a startup will literally be the toughest thing you've ever done. I know you've all been through a lot going through engineering. I've been there too. But it will be really hard. So if you do it, the best case is it's gonna be the most impactful thing you do. The worst case is you're gonna learn more than you did in all of your education combined. So either way, it's a win if you can stomach all the difficulty. If this sounds exciting, there are so many things you can do. Velocity Garage is one of the options. You can look at our whole portfolio of programs. We do pitch competitions every single term. So if you wanted to pitch your capstone at one of our pitch competitions this term, look out for the applications. They open on Monday. I think that's all I have to say. I would love to answer some questions if you have any. Thank you. Yeah, okay. Good question. So I'll just do a quick story of the company itself and then what happened to it, right? So we were a capstone project. You saw all that. We moved to the Accelerator Center, which is in the North Waterloo Park. When Velocity Garage opened up downtown, we moved from the Accelerator Center to the Velocity Garage. Then we got into Y Combinator, so we went to that accelerator for 3 months in California. We came back. We continued to deploy. We got a deal with Metrolinx, 7-Eleven, Sobeys. We got a deal with Well.ca, Walmart.ca. So we started really building out the marketplace, deploying units and machines. We probably got the network up to about, I want to say like 40 units. So like in train stations, in grocery stations, real users, hundreds of packages, if not thousands of packages a day being delivered. We'd raised funding to do that, right? Because it cost a lot to build all that. And through Y Combinator, we were connected with some investors who were willing to do what's called our Series A. So it would have been like a multi-million-dollar round. And around the same time, Google started working pretty aggressively on this product called Google Shopping Express, which was their response to Amazon. And so they approached us saying, actually, we believe BufferBox will be a critical part of Google Shopping Express. We'd like to buy the company. So we were stuck between, do we build it on our own, raise money, or do we get acquired by Google? A good financial outcome, but now the baby's in someone else's hands. We took that option, and so we were acquired by Google. A year later, Google shut it down. I could talk for an hour about that, but you asked a very specific question. I'll give you a specific answer. And then, yeah, that was the end of our company.
Is there any affiliation with, like, Amazon currently has a BufferBox equivalent throughout the States? Is there any affiliation to that?
Yeah, so the question was, Amazon has a similar thing called Amazon Locker. Is there any affiliation to that? No, but surprisingly, like 2 months after we graduated and we were at the Accelerator Center, they announced their first pilot program. And our gut reaction was like super suspicious. Like, oh, they copied us. You know, they must have seen something at Symposium, which of course is not true. They must have been working on it for a while before that. No, so they were developed in parallel. Yeah. Yeah. I'll get you next.
Yeah. So you talked about you showed the screenshot from that one really successful message to the FedEx guy.
Yeah.
What kind of what about the other side? Like, what kind of failures did you have messaging people? The outcomes. And what did you learn from the failures of these messages?
Yeah, okay, so the question was, what did we learn from the failure of these messages? So this is the good case, but what about the bad case, right? Often the bad case was just no response. Very rarely did someone take the time to respond and not be helpful. We got some responses that they would just tell us some stuff in the email, but said they didn't have time for a call. Still helpful. I don't think there's any like negative reactions. Like nobody was like, "How dare you contact me on LinkedIn?" No, nobody did that. So I don't think you need to worry about contacting people. Again, I think also the structure of the message, right? Like if I had worded that as, we're going to disrupt your business and you don't know anything and we know everything, I'm sure I would have pissed some people off. Yeah, I don't think there's anything to worry about as long as you structure it right.
There are a lot of startup guides out there that's teaching us how to, the timeline of how to build a startup. But for Capstone, we only have 8 months and we need to build something end to end. So do you see what is the biggest difference between the processes of building a Capstone product versus building a normal startup?
Yeah, okay, so the question was, there's lots of startup guides out there and playbooks of how you might do it, but Capstone's particularly unique because you've got 8 months and you've got an academic requirement that's technical. So how does that relate to the startup journey?
Yeah,
which
are the things that we should be taking from those guides, which are not?
Yeah, okay, so how do you blend those guides in the startup story with Capstone? That's tough because you have a particular academic requirement, so you have to meet that as a minimum to pass. And so anything else you want to do startup-wise is really just outside of the academic spectrum, where it gets over and above, right? So if you've decided that that's something you want to do, you're going to be working double time, triple time, quadruple time. You're not going to be getting any academic credit for it. But that's because you've decided you want to take a crack at making this a product. The beauty of Capstone is that all of that work, though, overlaps with what you're doing on the business, right? You can make it overlap. And so if you need to do a bunch of user testing, maybe in 4B, you should take a user design course and talk to the prof and say, hey, I know this is the final project, but can I actually do the final project based on the design that I want to make for my thing, right? So you can try and do some double dipping that way. I'm sure there are limits, and each prof will have their own flavor of how they deal with that. But if you're really nice, most of them will be supportive. But yeah, I think it's just a head start. You get an 8-month head start compared to anyone else starting a company because you can do it without any risk inside the university.
What are your thoughts on validating ideas where the technology is like really hard to use? For example, let's say like autonomous cars, like 10 years ago, how would you validate that? Because to me, it seems like the only way you would validate that is say like, oh, people like taxis, and we could do it for cheaper, like that's a good idea.
Yeah, okay, so the question is how do you validate really complex, what I would call highly disruptive ideas? So autonomous vehicles was the example you threw out. So that really is the crux of this Toy Markets post. So you should read that because it'll resonate with you. But you're right, a lot of it is projection, right? Like you have to imagine the future that you believe is going to unfold, and you all have a better perspective of the future than the average person because of what you've seen and the experiences you've had. So trust that more than the average person's perspective of what the future is going to be. And then figure out, okay, to get from our current state to that future that I know is going to happen, what's going to change in the world, right? And then how can I capitalize on that change, right? So if all of you with conviction know that autonomous vehicles are coming, which I would imagine many of you believe, right? The average person may not. They may still think they're 20 years away. Then you can say, well, I think that means that nobody's going to own a car anymore, because why would you? Okay, and I think that means all of the financing operations that car manufacturers have are going to die, which gets rid of that entire profit center, which means they need to come up with a new way to solve this. And so again, you follow the money and you figure out, well, shit, now I really understand what's going to be disrupting the market, and I'm going to build a startup over there, because by the time GM realizes, or whoever, I shouldn't pick on GM, but I'll be there, and then they can do something. Sorry, yeah, I should have said something. Toyota, that's what I meant. Okay, I think I'm being wrung out.
We're out of time, unfortunately, but thank you, Jay.
Thanks for having me.